Hello? I'm over here.
You're not going to be COVID boy tonight, I hope.
I'll try not to be.
COVID boy. COVID boy.
Are we recording yet?
I always start the record now when I turn on the camera because remember I forgot that time?
Mm-hmm.
So now I don't take any chances. When I turn on the program, the camera goes on.
Okay, so the other thing is I'm going to build a backdrop event.
Getting Hans and Franz.
Hans and Franz.
Hello, Hans. It's good to see you.
I love it. I love it.
I do my reclines.
My recline. What an idiot. I love it.
My heady bass. My neck movements.
My neck movements. I love it.
I'll probably be in a brace tomorrow.
I was going to say you just blew out a hammy. You were doing upper pectorals, but somehow you blew the hammy out.
Yes.
It's called aging.
I know you chat. I just squat. I do my horse position.
It's called aging. You know, the guys in their 20s and 30s don't get it, but when they catch up to us, they'll get it. They won't think it's funny anymore.
If they make it.
Well, suffice to say, the bulk of them will, right?
In this world? Are you shitting me? No. I don't think that's a good assumption.
What, make it to 50?
Dan,
okay.
We might all be fucking dead.
Well, okay, barring...
Taking this seriously, man.
Okay, barring catastrophic stuff like that, okay? It's not that I'm not taking it seriously. I'm just saying, statistically speaking, the odds, whatever, right? I mean, if we have a nuclear war tomorrow and we blow the whole planet, I'm with you.
Yeah, in a perfect world, statistically speaking, people will make it to 50.
Yeah, there should be no problem, even with the lousy American diet, right? It's still, you know.
Well, I don't know, Franz. I think I might pop something.
Joey, bag of donuts.
Okay. Yeah. I could eat a bag of donuts. That's wouldn't it be great if doing something like that actually led to something positive? Now then, the U.S. would be top in the world.
Joey Bag of Donuts. We
We
lead the
eat bags
world.
of donuts. Yeah, actually, you have the
Mhm.
eating champion. I think
Do we have the eating champion? We must.
his name's Joey. I think that's
Is it
what
really?
I'm referring to. Yeah, yeah. He used to be that Japanese guy who always used to win those hot dog eating contests, and then this guy
Really?
Joey whatever came along. It sounds like Joey Bag of Donuts actually. Yeah, I'm
So Joey B from the U.S. displaced the former Japanese champion.
yeah. Let me look. Eating champion.
The former Japanese champion didn't know it hit him, right?
Yeah,
Until
it used to be Tariku Kobayashi. Now it's Joey Chestnut. Joey
Joey
Chestnut.
Chestnut from Jersey, right? North Jersey,
Yeah,
off
he's from that
95.
area. He's from that area.
Is
He
he?
ate
I'm just
75
making this up, by the way. I'm just throwing it out
I
there.
don't know where he's from. He sounds like he's from there. He ate 75 hot dogs in like 10 minutes or something, or whatever.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
What's that going to take? 2 weeks to digest? Seriously.
I would think. I would think you're not eating for a while after that.
I mean, God almighty. Right? I mean, I don't know how long that would take me to digest that. I wouldn't eat for the next 2 weeks.
Listen, if you put a gun to my head and say you have to eat this or die, I don't
Yeah.
think I could eat 75 hot dogs. And
Well-
he eats them with the bun.
I was going to say, is the bun included? Is he
Yeah.
going?
Yeah, because that's what takes up all the space.
Oh God. I mean, what is he, like 6'2", 450 or something?
No, he's actually he is these new age competitive eaters are actually consider themselves athletes, believe it or not.
No, they don't.
They do. They do. And they work out. I don't, this is what I heard. And they treat their body like they're almost like these porn people. They like are maniacal about their bodies. And then, because to stretch your body to do that stuff, I mean, it stresses the body.
Oh, absolutely. 75 hot dogs. Yeah. Are you kidding me? I can't.
You want me to read?
Um,
You want to start with an intro as to what we're doing and why we're doing it, and if you want,
yeah, I guess so.
I thought this quote. I think this is really a great way to start right here. Behold a pale horse by Milton William Cooper. And I looked, and behold a pale horse, and his name that sat upon him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with the beasts of the earth. The Holy Bible, the book of Revelation, chapter 6, verse 8. And his disclaimer says, the ideas and conclusions expressed in this work are mine alone. It is possible that one or more conclusions may be wrong. The purpose of this book is to convince you, the reader, that something is terribly wrong. It is my hope that this work will inspire you to begin an earnest search for the truth. Your conclusions may be different, but together maybe we can build a better world.
Here's what I would say.
I thought that was a good way to start it.
It was, but
that's basically why we're doing this, correct?
well,
Because this man's not here to read it himself.
okay. Correct. What I would say is we need to give a brief 1 or 2 minute backdrop, right? We need to let people know in general. We don't have to deep dive, 50 feet, but we should give a minute or two dialogue or backdrop as to who William Cooper was, okay? William Cooper, and Dave, feel free to jump in, okay? Because you have actually more background on him than I do. So I'm more of a Johnny-come-lately. But William Cooper, I see this guy sort of analogous to, in a lot of ways, even though he's not a contemporary, very analogous to Smedley Butler. For those of you not familiar with Smedley Butler, you want to educate yourself. You'll get an education on that. It's about a 20-page paper, PDF. You could do a search for it on the Google or internet or whatever. It's called War is a Racket. Okay. This guy is an American, in my view, hero as well, but he's an unsung hero, much like Smedley Butler, meaning most people, particularly Americans, have no idea who Smedley Butler is because he's not taught about in school. Likewise with this gentleman, this guy's more of a contemporary, actually. He just died around just after 9/11, right, Dave? So he's definitely
November
more...
5th, 2001.
Okay, so he's a contemporary, basically. So there would be an excuse why they wouldn't necessarily talk about this guy just yet in school. Smedley Butler, though, is a different story. But they're both similar. They both, or in this case, William Cooper, would be viewed as probably, I guess, a modern-day whistleblower, I guess. And here's a guy that was born in, I believe, 1943, in May 6th, I believe, 1943. He's from, I forget, was he born in Texas or Oklahoma? Somewhere in the Southwest. Anyway, when he grew up, he grew up in those days hunting and stuff like that. And eventually, as a young man, he joined the Air Force. He did a stint in the Air Force, I forget how many years. And then after he got out, shortly thereafter, he joined the Navy. I don't know exactly how many years he did in the Navy, but suffice to say, he got to a point in the Navy. I don't know if he was a low-ranking officer, I couldn't tell, but he got to a point in the Navy where he became part of the naval intelligence community, obtained the highest level of top secret security as well. Shortly thereafter, obtaining the highest level of top secret security, and I'm not an expert in this area, that's all I can say, he learned a few things that really stunned him and knocked him down. The biggest thing he learned that everybody can relate to, I think even a lot of millennials have probably heard of John F. Kennedy. The biggest thing he learned at that point was the John F. Kennedy assassination essentially was an inside job. What does that mean? The U.S. government took out our 32nd president. Naval intelligence, according to him, this guy is either telling the truth or he's off the reservation. So it's for you to decide. But according to him, naval intelligence was involved in that assassination, as was the Secret Service that day. And according to him, the Secret Service member, although I don't know who was driving the vehicle that day, was the person that actually, I guess, turned around and essentially shot Kennedy in the head. That's what he's saying. Now, whether you believe this or not, folks, whether you think this is conspiracy or not, let me just put this out there. The Kennedy records, maybe 5 or 8 years ago, and Dave, maybe you can look it up or something, were sealed again for 75 more years.
I thought Trump was going to release all those documents. Didn't he promise that when he was running?
I don't remember that, but it's, all I can tell you is, why were the records sealed for another 75 years? I'm just asking the question. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I'm just asking the question. Why are we hiding this from the American people? 75 years is plenty of time for 2 or 3 generations or 1 or 2 generations to die. That's what I do know. Okay. Anybody that was around at all during the Kennedy assassination at that point would be 89 years old right now. So they'll be long gone. Generation Xers like us will be long gone in 75 years. Millennials, most of them, half of them will be gone. So that takes out 2 or 3 generations for the ceiling of 75 years. By the time you get 75 years out in the future, you don't have to be a genius to figure this out. Nobody's going to remember. I mean, they're going to know, yeah, Kennedy was the 32nd president, whatever. By then, you'll be so many generations out, you'll be like 3, 4 generations.
Well, think about it. It would be like concealing something from 1900.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's like the War of 1898 documents unsealed.
Right. So we find out today what happened 100 years ago, even if it was totally egregious, totally illegal, totally unethical, immoral, you name it, keep going. It's like 4 generations ago. I mean, what the hell can we do at this point? I guess. What can you do? I don't know. I'm not a legal scholar or whatever either, but just commonsensical. What can you do? I mean, what do? You go after their family members or something? I don't know. Hey, your granddaddy did this. We'll put you in jail. I mean,
Well,
you know.
there is some. I mean, the bottom line is you know, in World War II, the Germans stole all that art from the Jewish people, and I'm pretty sure that art goes back to the owners. If you have
There you go.
stolen goods, if you buy stolen goods, it's too bad, so sad for you.
It begs the question, and I don't know this, statute of limitations, right?
There is no statute of limitations.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Does it even apply? Assuming it doesn't apply, which, you know, we'll assume it doesn't apply. It might apply. I don't know. Maybe some international law somehow it might. Interpol or something. I don't know. That's another research effort. But without going down these rabbit holes, the bottom line is that is one of a few things, claims that this guy makes to start off with. Now, interestingly enough, he wrote this book, I think in 1991 or 92. He says in the book, various attempts were made on his life 3, 4, 5 times, okay, in which government officials or agents showed up. 2 or 3 times he was driven off the road, literally, off a cliff and stuff. And one time almost died and was left for dead. Yep, it's about a 500-page book, folks, that this guy wrote, full of information that's going to blow your mind. The first 40 pages or so are his background and intro.
One basic truth can be used as a foundation for a mountain of lies. And if we dig down deep enough in the mountain of lies and bring out that truth to set it on top of the mountain of lies, the entire mountain of lies will crumble under the weight of that one truth. And there is nothing more devastating to a structure of lies than the revelation of the truth upon which the structure of lies was built. Because the shock waves of the revelation of the truth reverberate and continue to reverberate throughout the earth for generations to follow, awakening even those people who had no desire to be awakened to the truth.
And isn't it interesting how the name of the book is called Behold the Pale Horse? The pale horse is one of 4 horses that comes from the book of Revelations from the Holy Bible. And the book of Revelations is the last book of the Holy Bible. It's the 66th book of the New Testament, for those that aren't familiar. And so 4 horses are symbolically mentioned in the book of Revelations, one being the pale horse, one being the black, one the red, one the white.
Right, and if you're interested in that, then you can watch Dan and I talk about the book of Revelation.
Exactly, yep. But that's where the pale horse refers to death.
Okay.
Hence the name of this book. Yep.
We'll just show it. No need to review that.
Yep.
Introduction. Some time ago, I had the opportunity to meet William Cooper and his wife, Annie. It was part of my job to verify whether this man didn't speak the truth or was just another person seeking fame and fortune. What I found was a rugged bulldog, driven individual who was kind, thoughtful, and tender-hearted. He was truly concerned about you and your welfare. Bill knew that people were badly informed by a society which spoon-feeds you deception until there is no distinction between fiction and reality. He sees what many others see happening, and he is not afraid to do something about it. There are many who do not want you to know what Bill has to say. They have tried many times to stop him from saying it. The scars on his face and the loss of his leg are his badges of sincerity on your behalf. No one becomes popular by telling people the truth. History records what happened to the true prophets of the past. However, some have listened to their warnings and were not caught off guard. Others have put their heads in the sand and refused to listen. Bill has it together and has put it together for you so you can also be one of the informed of the world. A well-informed person can make the right decision. William Cooper has my vote of approval because I cared enough to find out who the man is. Now is your opportunity.
So the one comment I would make here, if you scroll back for a second, is where it says, No one becomes popular by telling the truth. History records what happened
Yeah, that's from the book of Revelation.
to the true prophets of the past. So, you take John the Baptist. Unfortunately, he was boiled to death. You take,
Not only that, we just did the section on the witnesses, Dan.
yeah, you take Elijah, the prophet. He was actually cut in half. So it's just ironic when there's people that have good intentions and they really want to tell the truth, what happens to them in this world or can happen to them.
And we just did a whole hour discussion on the book of Revelation, chapter 11, which talks about this.
Yeah. There have been many related sequential coincidences all through my life, incidents that by themselves would have led nowhere. Statistically, the odds against the same or a related sequence of events happening to one individual are astronomically high. It is this series of incidents that have convinced me that God has a hand in my life. I do not believe in fate. I do not believe in accidents. I cannot and will not accept the theory that long sequences of unrelated events determine world events. It is inconceivable that those with power and wealth would not band together with a common bond, a common interest, and a long-range plan to decide and direct the future of the world. For those with the resources to do otherwise would be totally irresponsible. I know that I would be the first to organize a conspiracy to control the outcome of the future. If I were such a person and a conspiracy did not yet exist, I would do it in an attempt to ensure the survival of the principles in which I believe, the survival of my family, my survival, and the survival of the human race, if for no other reason. I believe, therefore, that a grand game of chess is being played on a level that we can barely imagine, and we are the pawns. Pawns are valuable only under certain circumstances and are frequently sacrificed to gain an advantage. Anyone who has studied military strategy is familiar with the concept of sacrifice. Those who have seriously studied history have probably discovered the real reason we go to war on a regularly scheduled basis. AKA, I referred to Smedley Butler earlier. Before reading this book, I advise you to play at least 2 complete games of chess. You must learn the rules they play by. You must realize objectively that some pieces are more valuable than others and that the king is the most valuable of all. You cannot learn reality if you get caught up in the fantasy that it's not fair. You must come to know that the ultimate outcome of the game is the only thing that counts. You were lied to when you were told that it does not matter whether you win or lose. It's how you play the game. Winning in the world of the elite is everything. Indeed, it is the only thing. The power elite intend to win. My research has shown at this point that the future laid out for us may be just impossible to change. I do not agree with the means by which the powerful few have chosen for us to reach the end. I do not agree that the end is where we should end at all. But unless we can wake the people from their sleep, nothing short of civil war will stop the planned outcome. I base that statement not on defeatism, but on the apathy of the majority of the American people. 25 years ago, I would have believed otherwise, but 25 years ago, I was also sound asleep. We have been taught lies. Reality is not at all what we perceive it to be. Sound familiar, folks? We cannot survive any longer by hanging on to the falsehoods of the past. Reality must be discerned at all costs if we are to be a part of the future. Truth must prevail in all instances, no matter who it hurts or helps, if we are to continue to live upon this earth. At this point, what we want may no longer matter. It is what we must do to ensure our survival that counts. The old way in the certain process of destruction and a new world order is beating down the door. To cling to the past is guaranteed suicide. To remain apathetic is assured enslavement. To learn the truth and then act upon it is the only means of survival at this moment. To shrug off the information contained in this book and to disregard it, its warning, will result in a complete destruction of the Republic of the United States of America. I mean, this is heavy stuff, guys. This is coming from a formal naval intelligence officer, okay? So that had the highest security clearance. And he found that it was his duty to do this. Otherwise, you know, and these aren't his words, it's just my interpretation. I mean, he strikes me as the type of guy that this was his ethical and moral duty to do this, otherwise total dereliction of duty. You will never get a second warning or a second chance. Like it or not, this is it, stark reality. You can no longer turn your head, ignore it, pretend it's not true. Say, it can't happen to me, run or hide. The wolf is at the door. I fear for the little ones, the innocents who are already paying for our mistakes. There exists a great army of occupationality, orphan children. They are attending government-controlled daycare centers. Ain't that the truth? In latchkey kids who are running wild in the streets. In the lopsided, emotionally wounded children of single welfare mothers, born only for the sake of more money in the monthly check. Open your eyes and look at them, for they are the future. In them I see the sure and certain destruction of this once proud nation. In their vacant eyes I see the death of freedom. They carry with them a great emptiness, and someone will surely pay a great price for their suffering. If we do not act in concert with each other and ensure that the future becomes what we need it to be, then we will surely deserve whatever fate awaits us. I believe with all my heart that God put me in places and in positions throughout my life so that I would be able to deliver this warning to his people. I pray that I have been worthy and that I have done my job. This is my creed. This is William Cooper's creed. And then he goes on to say here, I believe first in God, the same God in which my ancestors believed. I believe in Jesus Christ and that he is my Savior. Second, I believe in the Constitution of the Republic of the United States of America. Without interpretation, as it was written and meant to work, I have given my sacred oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I intend to fulfill that oath. Third, I believe in the family unit and, in particular, my family unit. I have sworn that I will give my life, if it is required, in defense of God, the Constitution, or my family. Fourth, I believe that any man without principles that is ready and willing to die for at any given moment is already dead and is of no use or consequence whatsoever. Very strong words.
Read the rest of it.
I did.
William Cooper, August 3rd, 1990, Camp Verde, Arizona.
Camp Verde, Arizona. Yeah.
The part I wanted you to read, August 3rd, 1990. That's 30 years ago. So those people he was talking about, they're adults. They're 30 years old or older. The destruction that he was forecasting, this is it, folks. Because think of the assholes we've had in the presidency since then. We had George Bush, Bill Clinton. What?
Yeah, George Bush, who, by the way, Papa Bush, who talked about the New World Order back then. Go on.
Yeah, and he was also in Dallas, supposedly, when he was outside, there's photos of him outside the hospital waiting to confirm that Kennedy was dead.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
He was working for the CIA back then.
I knew he was a former CIA man. That I did know. Yeah.
Yep, and then we had Clinton. And then after Clinton, we had Bush, and we had Obama, and now we have Trump. Not exactly the best and the brightest.
Nope.
But that's just the president. Then if you look at the clowns who make up Congress.
God almighty.
But let's not give the people of this country a pass, because George Carlin is one of the best sources for all of this, because he is a great observer. And he comes out and he says, this is the best we've got, folks. If you have ignorant, selfish, you know, idiots in your population, that's who you're going to get as your politicians. Something to that effect.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just common sense. I mean, the politicians have to come from somewhere. They come from our society. And if our society is breeding a certain type of person on average or lack thereof, you know, I guess the way to put it is we always hear fellow citizens complaining and bemoaning and ridiculing our politicians. Okay, great. But, you know, at the end of the day, folks, the truth hurts. You got to look in the mirror. We all do. The politicians ultimately are a reflection of us. We put them in office. They came from society. They came from us. They have family members, etc. They were raised a certain way or not a certain way, however you want to put it. They're a reflection of us. They're a reflection of the people that they supposedly represent. So I guess what I'm saying is we're all at fault. Whether we know it.
Let's just look at this creed and let's go one by one and let's see if actually anybody in this country actually believes this anymore. Number one, I believe first in God, the same God in which my ancestors believed. I believe in Jesus Christ and that he is my savior. Does this country believe that?
Well, there was a time when I could absolutely unequivocally.
No, I'm talking today in 2020. Does this country?
Okay, well, if you let me,
it's
make
a yes
comment.
or no.
Right this second, I would say no. There was a time otherwise you could unequivocally say yes.
Okay,
I'm not sure I can say yes anymore.
Yep. Yep.
I'm not sure I can.
Okay. Second, I believe in the Constitution of the Republic of the United States of America without interpretation.
That's
Without interpretation.
That's a no-brainer.
As it was written and meant to work, I have given my sacred oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies and domestic.
Yep, that's a no-brainer.
I intend to fulfill that oath.
Yep.
And that is the problem today, is none of our politicians follow the Constitution.
Absolutely not. That's a no-brainer.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have these damn shutdowns right now.
We wouldn't have the shit show that we have right now, and it is a friggin' shit show. And absolutely, I don't believe half these schmucks, these clowns even know what the Constitution is anymore, just based on their actions. Not to mention, you take the Supreme Court that is, interpreting it all the time. It's not their job to interpret it, right?
Well, it is their job to interpret it, actually.
Well, no, I guess what I was trying to say was not to change it, that is, right? Their job is to basically carry it out, right?
Yeah, this is where you get into the definition of, is it a living document or is it meant to be interpreted as it was written?
Well,
and it's unfortunate that that's going to be one of the debate.
Let me put it this way. I don't like the word interpret in this case because interpret means subject to almost in an objective manner, subject to almost one's understanding.
Well, that's why he clearly states without interpretation.
Yeah, no interpretation. You're supposed to follow it. That's why they took the time to develop it and write it down.
And let me rephrase this, okay? What he wrote. Defend the Constitution of what?
The United States of America.
Not of China.
Yeah.
Not of Australia.
Yeah.
Not of Italy.
Yeah.
Not of Mexico.
Not Belize. Yeah.
No offense, the rest of the world, but you. Okay? You go take care of yourselves.
Well.
And the problem is the United States followed the examples of the rest of the world. Bad move. Bad move.
Well, it's not a bad move if, and I'm just being facetious now, if you want to become part of the New World Order, right? Basically, you want to have one government. People find this hard to believe, but this is coming, folks. This is not a joke. This is coming if you don't wake up, okay? New World Order, what does it mean? Most Americans don't even know what the term means. Here's what it means, folks. This isn't science fiction. Basically, no borders, language, or culture at that point. The removal of borders. You basically have one world government, one world court system, one world army, essentially, and one world currency. And if you have that, if we go to that, and if we participate in that, I'm just putting it out there to think about. If we decide to join that, what I call shit show, then take your Constitution, take your Bill of Rights, take it all, and flush that down the toilet, because that won't exist anymore. That won't exist.
Well, corporations will rule the world completely at that point.
Yeah, no kidding. You think we're in servants now? You ain't seen nothing yet. You will be a total slave and indentured servant.
Yeah, it'd be just like that Matt Damon movie you would like to refer to.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what's coming, unless people wake up.
A lot of people around the world like to make fun of the United States, you know, and our Constitution, especially when people start defending, you know, the right to bear arms. And I've had several debates with Australians I've known over the years, and they always come back to that saying, stupid Americans, you have to have your guns.
Yeah, we do.
Look at all these massacres you have to live through.
How you doing now in Melbourne? How's that going now? Well, you got police officers smashing in windows and beating you up because you don't have a mask on. Now, I'm not advocating violence. I'm not advocating shoot them back or whatever. But, you know, really, that's like Gestapo stuff, okay? Okay, you want that to go on in Australia, God bless you, okay? As for me in the U.S., baby, I don't think so. I'm not for it, okay? And that's where we're headed if we're not careful either, okay? And the Founding Fathers put the Second Amendment in there for a friggin' reason. I have members in my family that make fun of me and laugh. Oh, the Second Amendment, it's antiquated. Get rid of it. Okay, I'll tell you what. Okay, I'll tell you what, shithead. Let's get rid of it. Let's do the grand experiment. Let's defunct the Second Amendment. You take it out. Okay, and then you can count days afterwards, if you know what I mean.
You're going to get it back?
You'll never get it back, and then on top of it, you know what'll happen after that? Shit will happen that you can't even imagine, and it won't be good stuff, okay? You'll be on the wrong side of a rifle, and you'll have zero recourse, okay? Zero, okay? I hope you like fighting with either your fist or a butter knife, because that's all you'll have, okay? So the Founding Fathers had a lot of foresight, okay? Because they looked at history. They looked at history. They looked at the Bible. They looked at feudal Europe. They looked at what kings do. They looked at what warlords do. And they thought and devised a means, well, how can we prevent this going forward in the future, right? How can we arm and equip good, honest, working people so that the government has to think twice before they try to come down on them with the hammer? How can we do that? And that's what they did. No other country in the history of the world ever thought of that. Okay? Yeah, we're a little bit violent or whatever. We got our movies and stuff, which I don't agree with, you know. Yeah, shootings and stuff do happen at times. Yeah, it does. But, you know, nothing's perfect, right? Nothing's perfect. Yeah. Why don't we just defund the cops, too, while we're at it, and get rid of police stations and officers and stuff like that, and just let the friggin' criminals run amok? Yeah? I mean, you got to have a screw loose for ideas like that, in my opinion. Yeah, how's that going to work? You want to defend yourself? You want to go hand-to-hand combat when you got no police to call? You a martial arts expert? Are you good with a knife? Most people aren't.
Well, if you were actually trained in how to use a weapon, Dan, you wouldn't be so scared. Okay, and you wouldn't have to call the cops. You'd be able to defend yourself.
I'm not scared at all. I actually can defend myself to an extent.
Well, what I'm saying is,
most people, though,
I don't think we should rely on government or the police in many ways.
Well, I believe in law and order. Okay, let me put it that way. You know, you don't want vigilantism either. You know what I mean. So it's a fine line. Okay.
It goes back to the Bible. Okay, God understands that we are imperfect creatures and we're going to make mistakes. But does he take away our free will?
No. He gives us choice.
He gives us choice. And that means horrendous things are going to happen in this world. And the mistake that a lot of these regressives make is that they're like, we need bigger government. We need more government. We need more schools. We need more laws because everything has to be regulated.
Yeah, great. I got to have my ass wiped all the time now, and I got to ask permission for it first. Really? Yeah. No thanks.
True freedom is scary.
Yeah, it is because it's called total accountability.
things can go wrong.
That's right. It's called responsibility and total accountability. You're responsible. We have a society now that passes the buck, to coin the phrase from Harry Truman going back, right? Everybody does, including our politicians. They're perfect examples, right? Because our society's like that and we allow it. It's the curly shuffle. Just pass it off. Well, it's not me. I'll kick the can down the road. And this is why we're in the mess we're in. Problems are not easy to deal with. I'm the first to admit, even at a personal level, sometimes I shy away too. We're all human beings. We have our, weak days and frailties and everything else. But by and large, I mean, we have a lot of systemic problems that aren't being fixed.
Okay, should we continue?
Sure. So, this guy, if we didn't say it earlier or allude to it, folks, this guy ultimately paid for this stuff with his life. So I'll leave it at that right now.
Well, I was about to address that in the fourth item, but right now, third, he says, I believe in the family unit, and in particular, my family unit. I have sworn that I will give my life, if it is required, in defense of God, the Constitution, or my family. Okay?
Yep.
Fourth, I believe that any man without principles that he is ready and willing to die for at any given moment is already dead and is of no use or consequence whatsoever.
Strong words.
Wow.
Powerful. This guy, in my opinion, this guy
walked the walk.
He walked the walk, brother. You took it right out of my. Yeah, this guy was, he was like a real John Wayne. This guy, I didn't know him, but the way he writes, I mean, this guy was a guy's guy, a man's man, and he's straightforward, powerful words.
He didn't say, yeah, I believe in this, go protect me. This guy volunteered for Vietnam, right?
Yeah, he did. He was in combat. He got various medals, commendations, whatever you want to call it. And he served in 2 branches, by the way. So I guess if he's a quack and a whack job and a liar and treasonous and sedition or whatever, I mean, I suppose you could say that about him. I guess he served in 2 branches, right, willingly. So.
Yeah, and if you have not served in the military or certain jobs that require it, you have not taken an oath to the Constitution. So some people, is it that big a deal? Well, if you take your oath seriously, it is a big deal.
I mean, if you believe in the Holy Bible, and in particular you believe in the United States Constitution and everything it stands for, if you take that oath, then you're going to take that seriously.
And the oath is to the Constitution, not to the president, not to the governor, not to Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, don't get me going. Don't get me going.
So, but I'm just going to say this, and then
you sound antiquated, don't you?
Well, it all comes back to what Tilo said. People, and what the Bible says, people aren't going to move until they feel the pain. And by then it might be too late. Like I told you, if you were on the Titanic,
yeah, I know,
and you moved too late, you died.
Yeah. Well, I guess that was the intro. This is the forward. This is Bill Cooper here with his daughter. Yep. His wife was an Asian woman. This is his daughter, Dorothy.
Do you want me to read, or do you want to read?
Go ahead. You can read.
Okay. The one thing that I find most difficult is to write about myself. It is hard to understand why some people thirst for knowledge about me. It was never my intention to be anyone's hero. I am certainly no great example upon which to base one's life. I consider myself a very average, normal kind of guy. I have some pretty good points. I have some human failings. I am proud of some of my achievements, and there are things that I wish I had not done. I'm not perfect, and I am not sure that I ever want to be, but it is certain that I do not belong on anyone's pedestal. I am a man with a message, and the message will be accepted by only a few. To those few who will understand, I am your brother. Maybe we can change the future for the better. William Moore, in his disinformation publication entitled Focus, said that I am a fundamentalist preacher. 20 years ago, that would have been a compliment, but today it implies sleaziness. That is why he said it. I am not, and have never been, any kind of preacher. I am not starting a church. I am not developing a religion. I do not belong to any organizations. I do not have an entourage. There is no cult, and I am not a cult leader. No one camps out around my house. People have called radio talk shows claiming to have firsthand knowledge that I am a notorious right-wing extremist. Others have said they have proof that I belong to a white racist organization. Someone said they have found my name on a list of Communist Party members. A man in Los Angeles, always the same voice, calls when I am on radio claiming that I am an alcoholic. The truth is, most of my close friends and acquaintances consider themselves to be liberal Democrats. My only political stance is constitutional. My wife is Chinese. That rules out the racist propaganda. I fought the communists in Vietnam. I will fight them again, if necessary, but only on United States soil. I used to drink a lot of alcohol in my younger days. As I became older, the booze dwindled to a trickle. Now I do not drink much at all. Most of my friends have never seen me take a drink. Annie and I are fond of using wine in our cooking. The lies, no doubt, will continue. For the purpose of keeping everything in perspective, let's all understand that attempts to assassinate my character will continue and in all probability will become worse. Rather than let that get in the way, I want you to believe everything bad that you ever hear about me. See if that changes anything that I have been trying to tell you. See if it negates any of the proof. I believe that is the easiest way to handle those attacks. You who are sincerely interested in knowing will seek out me or those who are intimately close to me. Those who do are the only ones who will ever really know who I am. Those who do are the only ones who will ever really know who and what I am. My ancestors came from England, Scotland, and Ireland.
Scotland.
What?
Scotland.
Okay. You're going to do that character?
Here's a crater for you, laddie.
Yeah.
That's my Irish impersonation. I say, that's my British impersonation. Cheerio. Are we behind schedule? Sorry, go ahead, go on. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
I had I had relatives who fought on both sides in the Civil War,
Wow.
and some who fought in the Indian Wars. One of my ancestors was a horse thief in Texas. I don't know for sure, but I think he got hung for it.
Nice.
When I was a little boy, I heard whispers that there was some Cherokee blood in my family. Every time I asked about it, I was told to shut up. I never could figure out why everyone was afraid to talk about the Indian blood. I thought and still think that it is something of which to be proud. I have since discovered that the old folks in my family, like the old folks in almost every family, thought there was some stigma attached to being part Indian. In the old days on the American frontier, people lived by hard rules. If you weren't accepted by your neighbors, more than likely to end up dead. My paternal grandmother's family, named Vance, traveled to Texas in a covered wagon and were some of the first settlers in the area of Odessa. My great-grandfather, Vance, was a real cowboy who eventually became one of the first oil field workers. My great-grandmother, Vance, told me that one of their first homes was a dugout on the prairie. My great-aunt, sister, owned a photo of her father, my great-grandfather, Vance, standing in front of a saloon beside his friend. Both men had 6 guns stuck in their belts. When she was about 84 or so, She told me that my great-grandfather Vance had gone off to do some work for a rancher. It was during a particularly nasty Indian uprising. My great-grandmother was a newly married young woman at the time. She rose early one morning and saw smoke rising from the direction of one of her neighbors. Soon, a war party of 5 young braves rode up to her dugout. She told me that she was scared to death, but knew if she showed it, they would kill her for sure. The Indians were hungry. Great-Grandma Vance made them get down off their ponies, dragged them inside, and fed them. They didn't harm her. After filling their stomachs, they rode off in the direction where she saw smoke rising later that afternoon. She said that she learned later that she was the only one in the area that had not been burned out or killed. She was a very brave woman. Great-Grandma Vance died in a car accident just a short time after telling me that story. I thought it was a very strange way for her to die. She went from covered wagons to Fords and Boeing 707s. Grandma Vance saw just about everything that ever was important in the world in her lifetime. My paternal grandfather's family also rode across the country in a covered wagon. They strayed a little north, however, and ended up in the Indian Territory, now known as Oklahoma. They were on the front line during the Oklahoma land rush and succeeded in staking out 320 acres on Big Bear Creek, near what would eventually become Enid. A little town sprang up not too far away called Garber. They raised a lot of kids. I remember my great-grandmother cooking the biggest breakfast I had ever seen. We slept in real feather beds that swallowed us up. We ran to the outhouse in the middle of the night because we were embarrassed to use the chamber pot that great-grandma kept handy under every bed. In the morning, everyone would crowd around the wood stove in the kitchen or the coal stove in the parlor trying to get warm. My dad had given me a .22 rifle for Christmas, and great-grandma's farm was the first place that I ever went hunting. I got up before the sun one morning, tiptoed downstairs, and headed out for the creek. About 2 hours later, I saw my chance and shot a quail sitting up in a tree. I strutted proudly to the farmhouse, holding up the quail for all to see. Luckily, the farmhand saw me first. He burst out laughing and asked me what I thought I was doing with that sparrow. I ran off and buried the bird and never said a word to anyone. I learned later that quails don't sit in trees. For those who may think this to be a terrible thing, I must tell you that every boy in those days was given a rifle and taught to hunt. During hunting season, many a family managed to put aside some extra money because the boys brought home meat from the hunt. That money saved was sorely needed. It was considered a duty for a citizen to own a gun in order to carry out the intent of the Second Amendment to the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the citizens owned guns, the government could never become oppressive.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dan, you've talked about this before, about how most people back then knew the basics of life, how to hunt, how to fix things, how to shoot.
How to fish, how to plant vegetables.
How to take care of themselves.
All the stuff, the modern day person today laughs at all that. What do I need to hunt for? What do I need knowledge of that for? Mend a fence. What do I need to learn how to fish? You know, debone a fish, grow vegetables. I don't have to do all that. I've got my Starbucks coffee, my debit card, and my BMW.
Yeah, just go to Home Depot.
Just go to Home Depot. Yeah.
And that's why so many people today say to you, what do we need the Second Amendment for, Dan? It's antiquated.
Yeah, 100%.
Just like great-grandmother Vance. Okay, my mother's family came from Scotland and settled in North Carolina. They were hardworking and thrifty folk. Most of them were poor. I never knew much more about my mother's family. I don't even remember anyone talking much about them. I know that my grandmother, Nellie Woodside, was forced to give up some of her children when her husband died. There was not enough money to feed all of the kids. My mother was one of those chosen to live in a children's home until things got better. No one ever talked about my mother's father. When I asked about my grandfather, I was told, Red was no good, and you just mind your own business. I got the feeling that nobody liked him. He died before I entered this world. I was born May 6, 1943, and I was reared in a military family. My father is United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel retired Milton V. Cooper. He prefers to be called Jack, the nickname given to him by the family when he was a boy. Dad began his Air Force career as a young cadet flying biplanes and retired as a command pilot with thousands of hours to his credit. I have a picture of him standing in front of an old biplane in his leather jacket and his cap with the ear flaps. Just like Snoopy wears. Okay. I can remember the pilots gathered around the kitchen table talking about the planes and telling stories. Sometimes they discussed strange things like Foo Fighters or UFOs. When we were lucky, they got out the projector and showed the Kodachrome slides. That was a special treat. By the time I was 8 years old, I think I had already seen and been inside every plane the Air Force had ever owned. I had flown in several. I had seen many of them crash and had friends who had lost their fathers. I remember one night in the Azores at Lagos Field. We were at the base theater watching a movie when the projector ground to a stop. The lights came on and a plea was made for blood donors. We knew there had been a disaster. Everyone went outside and looked down the hill at the flight line. It was literally consumed in flames. We could see men on fire running through the night. A B-29 had crashed. I forget if it had been taken off or landing, but I will never forget the scene that was spread before me on that night. No one went back to the movie, even though we had only seen half. I was only 9 years old, but felt much older. I had seen many crashes, and I would see many more in the years to come. But I never saw anything that could ever compare to the wreckage, the fire, the devastation, or the loss of life caused by the crash of that B-29. We left the Azores a year later. As we climbed into the sky, I looked out the plane window. I could still see pieces of the wreckage where it had been pushed away from the runways. It was that incident that gave me an appreciation of the dangers that my dad faced on a daily basis. I knew then how lucky we were to see him walk in the door. Aviation wasn't safe in those days, especially for military pilots. We all knew families that had lost someone in a crash. I didn't always love my father. He was a strict disciplinarian. My dad did not believe in spare the rod, and his belt was put to use frequently in our family. I was a very sensitive but willful child. Rules didn't mean much to me until I got caught breaking them. Many times I was the focus of his anger. Like most kids, I didn't understand. I thought he was a tyrant. Now I appreciate his upbringing. I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that without his strict discipline, we most probably would have turned out bad. Now I love my dad. He is my friend. He is an independent, gregarious, feisty, tough, confident, adventurous, sometimes overbearing, handsome, big bear of a man. My mother told me that she fell in love with him because he looks like John Wayne, and he does. I have watched him progress from one who disdained any public show of affection to a man who is just as likely to hug you as shake your hand. On the other side, he has at times made me so angry that I could have punched him in the mouth, but I never have. It's damn hard for anyone not to like him. He is always up to some mischief, and I can guarantee you that no one is ever bored around my father. My mother is a real Southern lady. They used to call her kind a Southern belle. She is one of the last of a dying breed. Dovey Nell Woodside Cooper is the type of woman that men like to dream about when they're lonely. She is the kindest, gentlest woman that I've ever known. I do not make that statement just because she's my mother. It's true. She was beautiful as a young woman, and she is beautiful now. My mother is one of those people who, once she likes you, can't be driven away. She is loyal to a fault. I have seen her during the good and during the bad times. She never flinched, no matter what. It always surprised me that she could be so tough and yet so gentle, so kind, and loving all at the same time. Woe to anyone who ever harms my dad or one of her children in her presence. She is the best cook who ever stepped foot in any kitchen that was ever built. I love my mother probably more than anyone else in this world. I have a brother, Ronnie, and a sister, Connie. They are fraternal twins, 2 years younger than me. We were closer than most siblings when we were children because we spent so much of our life in foreign countries. where oftentimes we found ourselves unable to communicate except with each other. We had school friends, but school was often many miles from where we lived. We had few toys. Most of them were things that mother gave us, such as spools, cigar boxes, string, or anything else that we could find to keep us occupied. Every Christmas was a delight because we always got some real toys. Ronnie and I had a propensity to see how things worked, however, so they never lasted long. Everything we wore, including shoes, was ordered from the Sears catalog. It was the wish book, and we never tired of looking through it. We alternately loved each other, hated each other, fought each other, and defended each other, as I guess all kids do. Ronnie, his wife Susie, and their daughter Jennifer live in Garber, Oklahoma, where Ron sells John Deere farm equipment. Ron and Susie built the house with their own hands. As far as I know, they intend to live in that house until they die. Ronnie served as an officer in the Army in Vietnam here in the Silver Star. We haven't seen each other since 1976 after he came to visit me in the hospital after I lost my leg. Nevertheless, I love him and I miss him a lot. Neither one of us can afford to travel much unless it's business. But one of these days soon, I'm going to surprise him. Connie has shown me pictures, and Ron looks just like my great-grandfather. Almost every picture I've seen shows Ron in chaps, a Stetson, boots, and either near or on a horse. I guess that is about how it should be, as Ronnie always wanted to be a cowboy when he was a child. Connie has really turned out to be a fine woman. When she was little, I sometimes liked her and sometimes didn't. Little boys don't usually have much use for little girls. Since we only had each other to play with, however, Ronnie and I loved her a lot. But little boys just can't ever admit anything like that. I remember Connie always followed me everywhere I went. I couldn't get rid of her no matter how hard I tried. Her devotion and loyalty made me love her all the more. Of course, I pretended that she was a pain in the arse. As we grew older and began to realize that there was a really big difference between boys and girls, Connie began to take on an air of mystery. From that time until I was about 18, she baffled me completely. I remember when she was around 13 or so, she would throw temper tantrums when she got angry. She would stomp her feet, scream, run into a room, and slam the door. Ronnie and I thought it was a great show, but couldn't for love or money understand why she did it. When we asked Mom, she would just shake her head and say hormones. Connie grew up to be a beautiful woman and eventually married her high school sweetheart, Gus Deaton. They had two beautiful children, Janice and Chrissy. Janice is very much like Connie, loving and loyal. Chrissy is different. She's a redhead who loves to party. I guess Chrissy represents a freedom of spirit more than anything else. Connie's marriage deteriorated, and no one could figure out what was happening until Gus was diagnosed as having brain tumors. It was tragic. Everyone really loved Gus. As his disease progressed and he began to do crazy things, people just drifted away. I have always nurtured a very special love for Chrissy. She never deserted her father. When no one else could stand to be around him, Chrissy chose to go and live with him, so he won't be lonely, she said. Even now, I get all choked up when I think of that little redheaded little girl going to live with her sick father so he won't be lonely. His behavior was such that no one else could stand to be around him. At least that is what I'm told. It wasn't Gus's fault that he became ill, and I've always felt it just wasn't fair to Connie, the children, or Gus. I've since learned that life is seldom fair. Connie eventually remarried and moved to Austin, Texas, where she has established herself as a valuable employee of a large bank. Her husband is an executive for McGraw-Hill. His name, coincidentally, is Ron. We all like Ron McClure, especially Dad, who has formed a close friendship with him. My sister has really blossomed into a wonderful woman. She has become one of my dearest and closest friends. She has grown up to be so much a part of me that even now, I sometimes get a feeling to look behind me to see if that little girl is still there. I feel a great loss when I see that it's only Sugar Bear, my faithful dog. But then I love him too, so I can't complain. I graduated in 1961 from Yamato High School in Japan. That fall, I enlisted in the Air Force. I really wanted to go into the Navy, but I had always had a tendency towards car sickness and seasickness. I attended basic at Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, at Technical School for Aircraft and Missile Hydraulics at Amarillo Air Force Base. Upon completion, I was ordered to the 495th Bomb Wing of the Strategic Air Command at Shepherd Air Force Base, just outside of Wichita Falls. The name was later changed to the 4245th Bomb Wing. Don't ask me why. In just a short time, I had gone from a skinny kid who didn't know much about anything, even though I thought I did, to an airman who had a secret security clearance and worked on B-52 bombers, KC-135 refueling aircraft, and Minuteman missiles. I saw real atomic bombs. I worked around them on a daily basis. Because of that, I had to wear a dosimeter in case I was exposed to radiation. In those days, we were the elite of the Air Force, and we knew it. I received a letter of commendation for my work. In due time, I was awarded the National Defense Medal and the Air Force Good Conduct Medal. Actually, I think everyone was awarded the National Defense Medal so that no one would be embarrassed standing in formation with nothing on their chest. It was during this time that I met a couple of sergeants who kind of adopted me. We went out to the clubs together and usually ended up chasing women and drinking a lot of beer. They told me several stories about being attached to a special unit that recovered crashed flying saucers. Sergeant Meese told me that he had been on one operation that transported a saucer so large that a special team went before them, lowering all telephone poles and fence posts. Another team followed and replaced them. They moved it only at night. It was kept parked and covered somewhere off the road during the day. Since we were always half-tanked when those stories came out, I never believed them. Sergeants were known to tell some tall tales to younger guys like me. On November 22nd, 1963, I was on duty as CQ for the Field Maintenance Squadron. Most of the men were out on the flight deck working. The barrack orderlies had been assigned their tasks. The first sergeant was gone somewhere, and I was alone. I turned on the orderly room TV to watch the live broadcast of the President's motorcade in Dallas. I was not prepared for what I saw. I stared in disbelief as the events unfurled in front of my eyes. I knew that something had happened, but what? I had seen and heard the assassination, but my mind was not accepting it. I kept staring at the set to discover what it was that had happened when slowly the realization crept over me. A numbness spread up my arms and legs. I saw what had happened. The hair stood up on the back of my neck and a chill went down my spine. President Kennedy had been shot in front of my eyes.
At that point, huge tears began to stream down my face. Waves of emotion rushed through my body. I felt that I had to do something, so I picked up the direct line to the command center. I choked back the tears. When the command duty officer answered, I told him that the president had just been shot in Dallas. There was a pause, and he asked me, "How do you know he's been shot?" I told him that I'd watched it on television and then hung up the phone. I was numb all over. A few minutes later, the command duty officer called back and ordered a red alert at DEFCON 2. Defense Condition 2 meant war was imminent. The roar of jet engines could already be heard as the alert crews taxied their planes towards the runway. I was scared shitless as I ran from barracks to barracks, routing out the night and those who had the day off. We had been told we had about 15 minutes to launch all of our planes before the first atomic bomb would hit us in the event that the Russians launched an attack. I didn't even lock up the orderly room. I just jumped in the first car I saw, rode to the SAC compound, and reported to my red alert duty station. For the next 3 days, I slept under the belly of a B-52 bomber, staring at the Armageddon that hid just inside the closed bomb bay doors. We thought the shit had finally hit the fan. It was a great relief when the alert was ended. I left the Air Force with an honorable discharge in 1965. In December of the same year, I joined the Navy. I had always loved the ocean. I wanted to be a sailor since I was a little boy. Seasick or not, I made up my mind to follow my dream. I was sent to the Naval Training Center in San Diego for boot camp. Because of my prior Air Force experience, I was made the recruit chief company commander. I was allowed to keep my same rank and pay grade. We had a good bunch of guys in my company, and we had a great company commander, Chief Campbell, chief electrician's mate. He turned the company over to me. Chief was a good man. He was only interested in teaching us what we needed to know and in keeping us out of trouble. Unlike most boot camp instructors, Chief Campbell had no axe to grind and wasn't trying to prove anything to himself or anyone else. He was truly our friend. During boot camp, I volunteered for submarines. My sense of adventure was very strong. I was accepted, and upon completion of basic training, was ordered to the USS Tiro, SS-416, at the submarine base of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Spitfire and damnation. No one could possibly be that lucky. I couldn't believe my eyes when I read my orders. Here I was fulfilling my dream of being in the Navy. I got exactly what I asked for the first time that I asked for it, which was extremely rare in any branch of military service. And to top it all off, I was being sent to Hawaii, the land of tropical paradise. I was in seventh heaven. I landed in Hawaii with no time to play and took a cab directly to the subbase. My submarine was nowhere to be found. I kept asking people until I found someone who told me that my boat, subs are called boats in the Navy, was not at the subbase, but in the dry dock in Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. I hailed another cab. The cab driver dropped me off at the head of the pier that looked like it had never been cleaned up after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. It was covered with what appeared to be hoses, huge electrical cables, rusting metal of every conceivable size and shape that you can imagine. The air was rank with the smell of diesel, welding fumes, paint, and steel. If there is hell on earth, I thought this had to be it. I walked up the pier over to the edge and looked down into the dry dock. There, stripped of all dignity, lying naked and cut cleanly in half, was my boat, the USS Tiro. Men were scrambling all over it. They looked like ants swarming over a dead grasshopper. Brilliant flashes of light, brighter than the sun, drove sparks high into the air and then down in a beautiful flow to the bottom of the dock. I couldn't believe my eyes. Someone actually expected me to go out to sea, then underwater in what appeared to be a motley collection of cut-up rusting metals scavenged from some satanic junkyard, stuck together by demons with welding torches. My luck just had run out. I reported to the barracks barge moored in the water on the other side of the pier and was given a hammock for when I had the duty. Then I was sent to the sub-base barracks, where I was assigned a rack and a locker. I wanted to go into Honolulu, but quickly discovered non-quals did not rate liberty. It was getting worse. The next few months were spent sanding, painting, lifting, and learning the boat. The men of the crew, except for the chief cook, were great. The chief cook was drunk every minute of the day and night. He didn't like me, so I didn't get much to eat. His dislike stemmed from the first few mornings when I walked into the galley and watched as the other crew members ordered their breakfast. When there was an opening, I stepped up and asked for eggs over easy. That's when the chief hit the overhead and vowed that I would never eat a meal in his mess decks. He wasn't kidding either. The only time after that morning that I got anything to eat out of the galley was when the chief cook was ashore.
To this day, I still don't know what I did wrong. I could have gone to the captain, but if I had done that, I might as well have put in for a transfer at the same time. It wasn't long, though, before I was able to locate where he hid his booze. I made his life miserable from that moment on. I won't tell you what I laced his vodka with, but it wasn't anything you'd ever want to drink, believe me. I kept that chief so sick that he was transferred off the boat for medical reasons. I didn't want to hurt him, but it was either get rid of him or starve to death. I made up my mind that chief or no chief, I wasn't going to go to sea on a boat that wouldn't feed me. I didn't relish going to sea with a drunk chief in charge of closing the main induction valve when the boat made a dive. When a submarine goes underwater, certain valves must be closed or the boat will flood with water and everyone will drown. The main induction is the most important of those valves. It was the cook's duty to close it because the valve was in the galley on board the USS Tiru. I made especially two close friends while on the Tiru, a black seaman named Lincoln Loving and an American Indian seaman we called Geronimo. The three of us were inseparable. Lincoln was best man at my first marriage. Of the three, Geronimo was the most experienced seaman, so he taught Lincoln and me. He knew everything there was to know about the boat, rope, paint, and a whole lot of other things a man had to know to survive in the Navy. I knew the most about getting along in the military, so I taught Geronimo and Lincoln. Lincoln knew everything good spot on the island where we could have a good time, so he led the Liberty Party. Three things really stand out in my mind about the time that I spent on the Tiru. The first was an incident that occurred during a test dive while we were creeping along at about 3 or 4 knots at a depth of 600 feet off the island of Oahu. Lincoln and I had just been relieved from watch, and we're in the after battery talking when we were knocked off our feet. We heard a loud clang forward and felt the boat lunge to port. Then we heard a sound that made our blood run cold. I could literally feel the blood drain from my face as I listened to whatever it was that we hit scrape along the starboard side of the hull. Lincoln and I froze. We held our breath as metal screeched upon metal. I thought it would never end. No one moved anywhere. Finally, after what seemed a lifetime, the boat lurched and the noise disappeared aft. If it had pierced the hull, none of us would be alive today. We never found out what it was. When we returned to Pearl, divers went down to have a look. When they surfaced, they reported that the starboard bow plane was damaged and the hull was gouged all along the starboard side from bow to stern. We went in for repairs. In a couple of days, we were good as new. But I certainly had an entirely different perspective on life. The second thing that stands out happened to another boat that had been out participating in torpedo attack exercises with another submarine. I remember seeing the boat entering the harbor with a large tarp over the conning tower. I could see something holding the tarp up on each side of the tower, but I couldn't see what it was. Later, Geronimo, Lincoln, and I walked over where the boat was berthed and looked under the tarp. The other boat in the exercise had scored a direct hit. What we saw was a torpedo sticking completely through the sail. We started laughing. Then we looked at each other and decided it wasn't so funny after all. This submarine business was not quite as attractive as I'd thought. Number 3 happened during a transit between the Portland-Seattle area and Pearl Harbor. I was the port lookout during the afternoon watch. Geronimo was the starboard lookout. Ensign Ball was the officer on deck. We were doing 10 knots on the surface, and the three of us were on the bridge in the conning tower. It was a bright day, but the sun was obscured by a low layer of clouds. It was cool. We had a bit of fun when someone below requested permission to put a man on deck forward to get something that was needed from the waterproof deck locker. The locker was under the deck plate, all the way up on the bow near the forward torpedo room escape trunk. Geronimo and I laughed when Ensign Ball gave his approval. He really shouldn't have, because we were running a pressure wave over the bow. When we saw who it was they had sent on deck, we roared with laughter. We looked down over the side of the sail at the deck level door just as it popped open, and Seaman Lincoln Loving stuck his head out. He didn't look happy. Lincoln reached down and put the runner in the safety track in the deck, fastened the safety belt around his waist, and grabbing the handrail, stepped out on the deck. He looked up at us with that "don't you laugh at me" look that he did so well. It took him a few minutes to get up the nerve to let go of the handrail and begin to make his way forward against the wind and the pitching of the deck. Gingerly, he crept forward until he was just at the point where the pressure wave was rolling off the deck when the bow heaved free of the water on its cyclical upswing. I could see that Lincoln was trying to time a run forward when the bow was out of the water. He made a couple of false starts, then ran slipping on the wet deck, disappearing into the access hole for the forward torpedo room escape hatch. The bow plunged underwater, and I found myself sucking air as I imagined the cold salt water swirling around me. It wasn't me, though. It was Lincoln. I gripped the top of the sail as I waited for the bow to swing up, hoping that Lincoln wouldn't panic. What we saw next could have been a clip from one of those old Keystone Cop movies. Lincoln was flailing water so hard that it looked like he had 40 arms and 40 legs. It was only then that I realized that Lincoln had joined the Navy, but he didn't know how to swim. When he finally gathered a foothold, the half-drowned seaman exploded up out of the hole like a Polaris missile and ran back to the conning tower just as fast as his wet leather soles could carry him. Ensign Ball, Geronimo, and I laughed for a good 10 minutes. In fact, every time we saw Lincoln for the next 2 days, we would burst out laughing. Lincoln didn't think it was funny and didn't miss a chance to slug us every time we laughed. Lincoln went below. Geronimo and I began the unending task of sweeping the horizon from bow to stern, then the sky from horizon to zenith, and then back to the horizon from bow to stern, again and again, and then a pause to rest our eyes and chat for a few minutes. I asked Ensign Ball to call for some hot coffee. As he bent over the mic, I turned, raising my binoculars to my eyes, just in time to see a huge disk rise from beneath the ocean, water streaming from the air around it, tumble lazily on its axis, and disappear into the clouds. My heart beat wildly. I tried to talk, but couldn't. Then I changed my mind and decided I didn't want to say that anyway. I had seen a flying saucer the size of an aircraft carrier come right out of the ocean and fly into the clouds. I looked around quickly to see if anyone else had seen it. Ensign Ball was still bending over the IMC. He was ordering coffee. Geronimo was looking down the starboard side aft. I was torn between my duty to report what I had seen and the knowledge that if I did, no one would believe me. As I looked out over the ocean, I saw only sky, clouds, and water. It was as if nothing had happened. I almost thought I had dreamed it. Ensign Ball straightened, turned towards Geronimo, and said coffee was on the way up. I looked back toward the spot, about 15 degrees relative off the port bow, and about 2.5 nautical miles distant. Nothing, not even a hint of what had happened. Ensign Ball, I said. I thought I saw something about 15 degrees relative off the bow, but I lost it. Can you help me look over that area? Ensign Ball turned, raised his glasses to eye level. I didn't know it at the time, but Geronimo had heard me and turned to look. He was happy that something had broken the monotony. I was just lifting the binoculars off my chest when I saw it. The giant saucer shape plunged out of the clouds, tumbled, and pushing the water before it, opened up a hole in the ocean and disappeared from view. It was incredible. This time I had seen it with my naked eyes, and its size in comparison with the total view was nothing short of astounding. Ensign Hall stood in shock, his binoculars in his hands, his mouth open. Geronimo yelled, "Holy shit, what the hey? Did you guys see that?" Ensign Ball turned and looked right at me with the most incredulous look on his face and said in a low voice, "This has to happen on my watch?" He turned, quickly pressing the override in the IMC, and yelled, "Captain to the bridge, captain to the bridge." As an afterthought, he pressed the switch again and yelled, "Somebody get a camera up here." The captain surged up the ladder with the quartermaster on his heels. Chief Quartermaster Quintero had the ship's 35mm camera slung around his neck. The captain stood patiently while Ensign Ball tried to describe what he had seen. He glanced at us, and we both nodded in affirmation. That was enough for the captain. He called sonar, or during the excitement had reported contact underwater at the same time bearing. The captain announced into the IMC, "This is the captain. I have the con." The reply came back instantly from the helm. "Aye, aye, sir." I knew that the helmsman was passing the word in the control room that the captain had personally taken control of the boat. I also knew that rumors were probably flying throughout the vessel. The captain called down and ordered someone to closely monitor the radar. His command was instantly acknowledged. As the 5 of us stood gazing out over the sea, the same ship, or one exactly like it, rose slowly, turned in the air and tilted at an angle and then vanished. I saw the chief snapping pictures out of the corner of my eye. This time, I had 3 images from which to draw conclusions. It was a metal machine. Of that, there was no doubt whatsoever. It was intelligently controlled. Of that, I was equally sure. It was a dull color, kind of like pewter. There were no lights. There was no glow. I thought I had seen a row of what looked like portholes, but could not be certain. Radar reported contact at the same time, at the same bearing, and gave us a range of 3 nautical miles. The range was right on, as the craft had moved towards the general direction that we were headed. We watched repeatedly as the strange craft re-entered the water and then subsequently rose into the clouds over and over again, until finally we knew that it was gone for good. The episode lasted about 10 minutes. Before leaving the bridge, the captain took the camera from the chief and instructed each of us not to talk to anyone about what we had seen. He told us the incident was classified and we were not to discuss it, not even amongst ourselves. We acknowledged his order. The captain and the chief left the bridge. Ensign Ball stepped to the IMC and, pressing the override switch, announced, "This is Ensign Ball. The captain has left the bridge. I have the con." The reply, "Aye, aye, sir," quickly followed. Those of us who had witnessed the UFO were not allowed to go ashore after we'd berthed in Pearl. Even those of us who didn't have the duty were told we had to stay aboard. After about 2 hours, a commander from the Office of Naval Intelligence boarded. He went directly to the captain's stateroom. It wasn't long before we were called to wait in the passageway outside the captain's door. Ensign Ball was called first. After about 10 minutes, he came out and went into the wardroom. He looked shaken. I was next. When I entered the stateroom, the commander was holding my service record in his hands. He wanted to know why I had gone from the Air Force into the Navy. I told him the whole story, and he laughed when I said that after putting off the Navy for fear of chronic seasickness, I hadn't been seasick yet. Suddenly, a mask dropped over his face, and looking me directly in the eyes, he asked, "What did you see out there?" "I believe it was a flying saucer, sir," I answered. The man began to visibly shake, and he screamed obscenities at me. He threatened to put me in the brig for the rest of my life. I thought he wasn't going to stop yelling, but as suddenly as he began, he stopped. I was confused. I had answered his question truthfully, yet I was threatened with prison. I was not afraid, but I was not very confident either. I figured I had better take another tack. 18 years with my father and 4 years in the Air Force had taught me something. Number 1 was that offers just do not lose control like that, ever. Number 2 was that if my answer had elicited that explosion, then the next thing out of my mouth had better be something entirely different. Number 3 was that his response had been an act of kindness to get me to arrive at exactly that conclusion. "Let's start all over again," he said. "What did you see out there?" "Nothing, sir," I answered. "I didn't see a damn thing, and I'd like to get out of here just as soon as possible." A smile spread over his face, and the captain looked relieved. "Are you sure, Cooper?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I replied. "I'm sure." "You're a good sailor, Cooper," he said. "The Navy needs men like you. You'll go far with the Navy." He then asked me to read several pieces of paper that all said the same thing, only with different words. I read that if I ever talked about what it was that I didn't see, I could be fined up to $10,000 and imprisoned for up to 10 years or both. In addition, I could lose all pay and allowances due or ever to become due. He asked me to sign a piece of paper stating that I understood the laws and regulations that I had just read governing the safeguard of classified information relating to national security. By signing, I agreed never to communicate in any manner any information regarding the incident with anyone. I was dismissed, and boy, was I glad to get out of there. Not long after that incident, I was devolunteered from submarines. I was transferred to the USS Tombigbee. The Tombigbee was a gasoline tanker. It was more dangerous than the sub. The captain was crazy, and the crew was a combination of idiots and misfits. I once had to draw my pistol while I was petty officer of the watch to prevent an officer from being attacked by a seaman. The Tombigbee collided in the dead of the night with a destroyer in the Molokai Channel and several men died when the destroyer was almost cut in half. Every day aboard that ship was exactly like a scene right out of Mr. Roberts. I struck for quartermaster and managed to advance to the rank of second-class petty officer despite the obvious obstacles. I made 2 Westpac tours aboard the Tom Big B. They included a total of 12 months off the coast of Vietnam. We came under machine gun fire while anchored off Chu Lai. We had to do an emergency breakaway and leave the harbor. All we needed was one trace around in one of the tanks and kaboom. It would have been all over. The Viet Cong gunner probably got busted because the stupid jerk missed the whole damn ship. How can you miss a whole ship? The only other time I felt threatened was when we went up to a small outpost at DM2 called Qua Viet. It was a vision right out of hell. Qua Viet sat on the southern bank at the river mouth of the Thach Han River. We rode at anchor and pumped fuel ashore through a bottom ley line. Every night we could see the traces from firefights raging up and down the river and along the DMZ. It was a real hot spot. Every once in a while, Viet Cong or NVA rockets would slam into the camp. We would perform an emergency breakaway and put to sea until all was clear was sounded. Everything was cool until our wacko captain decided we were going into the river mouth. Did you ever try to put a pencil through the eye of a needle? That's about comparable to what we did. I'll never know how we got that big ship through the narrow mouth of that river with no navigational references whatsoever. We dropped anchor mid-channel, and the captain backed the ship right up to the beach and dropped the stern anchor into the sand. There we sat, a great big target full of gasoline. We were helpless in the mouth of a narrow river, with 3 anchors out, right in the middle of one of the hottest combat zones in Vietnam. That night, several men in the crew wrote letters to the Chief of Naval Operations requesting an immediate transfer. No one slept. I don't know why the enemy didn't send in the rockets, but they didn't. I knew then that God must keep a special watch over fools. The next day we set to sea and started for Pearl. The captain was relieved for incompetence later that year. Then I was transferred to school. I didn't know what school I had drawn. It turned out to be the Naval Security and Intelligence School for Internal Security Specialists. The general training prepared me to set up security perimeters, secure installations and buildings, and safeguard classified information. My training included special weapons, booby trap identification, and disarming, the detection of bugs, phone taps, transmitters, and many other subjects. I was specifically trained to prepare and conduct Pacific Area intelligence briefings. From the day I reported to school in 1968 until I left the Navy, I worked off and on for naval security and intelligence. Upon graduation, I was transferred to Vietnam. I had volunteered over a year before because I figured that my chances were better in the war than they were on that screwed up gasoline tanker. This was the first good news I'd had since leaving boot camp. I really wanted to fight for my country. I wasn't to find out what a real fool I was until a few years later.
That's a interesting statement. Until what a fool I was until a few years later.
Yeah, I figured that might be a good place to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Because this goes on for 40 pages, you said.
Yeah, it's a good place to stop. It's starting to get into the meat stuff, the good stuff about him becoming a naval intelligence officer and eventually getting the highest level of security and stuff like that. And upon getting that, shortly thereafter, him learning just astounding and baffling stuff that would just blow everybody's mind, if not most.
Well, from reading this so far,
yeah,
he sounds like a typical American, right?
Yeah, he sounds like a normal guy to me. Doesn't seem to have an agenda, doesn't seem to be out to lunch, doesn't seem to, he just seems like a regular, decent guy. Just describing, his background as he came up through the ranks, I guess, and performed his service, right?
Well, and I'm not sure, and I don't want this to come across too harsh because I really don't know, but back then, I think most people served in the military back then. And most people had fathers who were in the military back then because they had served in World War II or Korea, right? And so there was a very there, it was the John Wayne culture. I mean, you know, this was really the definition of what you did when you're in America, right? And that's why he finished by saying he didn't find out what a real fool he was until a few years later, because as Richie liked to say in that video that a few weeks ago, people in this country have turned the military into a sports team, right? Rah, rah, number 52 is my favorite. Hooray, I love him, right? When in reality, the military is a machine.
It's a machine. Yeah, it's anything but a sports team. Yeah, the military, especially the U.S. military.
And if it wasn't for people joining the military, then the machine might grind to a halt. And if the machine ground to a halt, then the United States wouldn't be able to support the petrodollar, and we wouldn't be able to.
Those are big statements,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm sure we're going to be getting into that in the future. I'm sure he's going to refer to this. I read this a long, long time ago. I read this.
This introduction?
No, I read this book.
You read the whole book?
Yeah. I read this
wow.
20 years ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So, well, I don't know about you, Dan, but maybe it's a shortcoming in my brain, but I don't remember everything that I read.
No, of course not. But
as I'm reading this, I remember it now, right? I remember the story as I'm reading these, and as you were reading, I knew what you were going to say because it comes back to you after you hearing it a second time.
Well, it's stored in the recesses of your mind. Yeah, absolutely.
And now that I'm reading this, maybe this book is partly responsible for why I awakened so early, Dan.
Right. Yeah,
we were talking about why I woke up before you.
We're going to start getting into the heavy, heavy stuff that people are going to be amazed. People are going to challenge it. Some people I can absolutely speak for, particularly certain family members or friends, will not believe it. They'll just dismiss it. They'll dismiss this guy as a kook. He will just be dismissed as a cuckoo pop by certain people, in my opinion, which is sad.
Well, a lot of people are going to say probably this guy took all these vows and then he broke them.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to disparage him and they're going to discredit him for sure.
And we can also go into Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning.
Okay.
Who broke their rules for sharing secrets of crimes committed by the United States military in Iraq, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know the case, to be honest.
You don't?
No, not.
Oh, Dan, come on, man.
That's a weapon.
Two Apache helicopters circle over a group of men walking in Baghdad in July 2007. They've been called in to assist U.S. ground troops. A helicopter gunner asks for permission to fire.
Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 1-8, have 5 to 6 individuals with AK-47s. Request permission to engage.
The U.S. soldiers say the men are carrying weapons. They received permission and opened fire on the group.
Let me know when you gather. What's your...
Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire.
In the incident, 12 people were killed. WikiLeaks, the group that posted the video, has identified 2 of the men as a Reuters news photographer and his driver. The U.S. military has confirmed the authenticity of the video, but not the identity of the 2 men. White House spokesman Robert Gibbs, commenting on the video, was vague.
Obviously, it is very graphic in nature, and it's and extremely tragic.
The video has revived a debate over rules of engagement in wartime and how to protect non-combatants. An earlier U.S. military report said American forces acted appropriately because they thought the group was a threat. The military has also said machine guns and grenades were found near the site, but some officials have said the soldiers mistook a camera for a weapon. The incident occurred at the height of the insurgency during the U.S. military surge. Defense analyst Michael O'Hanlon is with the Brookings Institution in Washington.
You had friends and enemies everywhere on the battlefield. And so that, for the most part, meant that if you got into trouble as a Westerner, you had potential help not too far away. That was reassuring. But it also meant that if you were unidentified, you had potential friendly fire not too far away at a moment's notice.
Iraq's journalist syndicate says the incident shows the violence that civilians have suffered during the war.
This latest crime can be added to the list of crimes committed by U.S. troops against Iraqi journalists and Iraqi civilians. There are U.S. troops who are incredibly crass and cruel in their treatment of citizens and journalists as well.
Reuters editor-in-chief called the incident emblematic of the extreme danger encountered by journalists when they cover wars. The news agency has pressed the U.S. military to conduct a full investigation. Gabe Joselo, VOA News.
Yeah, it's amazing any of them survived.
I'm very surprised any of them survived.
And there were kids in the vehicle.
Oh wow, yeah. I mean,
and so the United States tried to cover this up, and this is the thing that I've never understood, is why they try to cover these things up. Because in conflicts, you're going to have these type of mistakes.
Oh yeah, accidents are going to happen.
And that is why you always want to err on the side of doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is what happens is you turn these things into a video game, which is what these latest wars, these technologies with drones and with remote warfare, it's like a video game now, and pretty soon it will be Robo Warriors.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt. Yeah, we're headed that way. No doubt. We'll see it in our lifetime. Yeah.
So Dan and I are going to try to do, I mean, if we can do this if we can do more than once a week, we will. If we can't, then we'll do it once a week. Then we'll just touch base in the morning then.
Okay.
Plan in the morning.
I love it when you get decisive, by the way.
Yeah.